it's day 4 of this series of 4 arpeggio videos, and I'm still wearing the same shirt. I'm just kidding, I'm not that gross. And so I was only going to do 3 videos, a 3-part series, and then I had kind of an epiphany of how I can show you, most of you guys, how to actually get ideas for chord structures for songs when you're writing your own music based out of arpeggios, because of course musical writer's block, if you want to call it that, is always a major problem. I get it too. It's just one of those things that happens. One way you can combat it is by listening to a lot of music and not the same style of music, and not just guitar music. I listen to rockabilly, jazz, bebop, hard bop, swing, modal jazz, cool jazz, acid jazz, let's see, hip-hop, bluegrass, metal, death metal, Latin music, Afro-Cuban world music, gypsy music, flamenco, Andalusian style flamenco, classical guitar work. I don't know if I mentioned Cuban music. Basically a lot of different types of music. And not always just guitar music. It really helps with this thing right here, because we're actually the ear, the mind and the ear. But the ear is the most important thing to train if you want to learn how to improvise really well or create your own stuff. But I'll show you a little trick. Hopefully this makes sense to you. We were working on these arpeggios that are based out of major scales over the chord structures of G, C, and D. And the funny thing about them is those are really kind of, especially that chord progression, is just kind of like, you know, kind of like, ooh. But the actual arpeggios for them are very pretty. Or at least that form is. So if we took that exact arpeggio, I'll remind you to watch the last 3 parts of this video in order, because you'll probably be totally lost about what I'm talking about. So follow these in a very linear fashion and you should be good to go. But if we take these arpeggios themselves, like the G major one out of the G major scale, if we take the first 3 notes of that arpeggio, there's a chord structure right there. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure what that chord is, but it's a G chord. It's got a really powerful masculine sound, but it's also very gentle. Now if we take the, let's see, it'd be the 4th note of that arpeggio, which is the 4th fret on your G string. And we have to do a bit of an inversion here by placing our index finger on the 4th fret of the G string and our middle finger on the 5th fret of the D string, and our pinky on the 7th fret of the A string. And we can play that E open, your low E, with that, because that's an E chord. And it incorporates a percentage of the arpeggio as well. So if you go from that G, and take that first G structure and move it up to the A string without changing the fingering, then you can go back to that G. And that's all built out of the arpeggio. So arpeggios can give us wonderful ideas and real insight about our own writing. When we go in for a closer look, so you don't get lost, and I'll show you exactly what I was playing. Now believe it or not, but I did not have that pre-planned. After I hit record, I saw the arpeggios and the patterns jump out. And after a while you get really good at this. I don't want you to get frustrated and think that this isn't something that you can't learn how to do. I think more importantly than learning scales and modes, the most important thing is to train your ear first. That should be your #1 priority. And second, to train your eyes visually to see these patterns. And those work hand in hand really well with each other. And for instance, when I first started playing guitar, before I learned any scales and modes, I started seeing shapes, like triangular shapes or diamond shapes. You know, kind of a D chord has this triangular shape to it. I started seeing those all over the place, different variations of that. And that's essentially what we have here. The first 3 notes of that G major arpeggio are the 3rd fret on the low E, and then if we add the middle finger to the 5th fret on the A, and then the pinky to the 7th fret on the D string. It's a bit of a stretch if you're a new guitarist. It's okay, don't hurt your hands, but after a while your hands get really strong. But it makes this, let me get my ring finger out of there, it makes this sort of a pattern that goes down like that. And that's that full chord. And that encompasses the first 3 notes of the arpeggio. Okay, now I excluded the C when I did this, but I'm going to go ahead and go with it. I didn't incorporate the C chord for this. Instead I switched it to an E. And the way I did that was I played E open, your low E, put my pinky on the 7th fret of the A string, which is also an E, so we have 2 E's, and then I attached my middle finger to the 5th fret on the D string, and then my index finger on the 4th fret of the G string. I use a lot of chords like this. They're kind of, one way of looking at them is that they're inverted chords. But look, notice this. Explain the triangular formation that goes downward like that, and now when I switch this chord, it's going this way. And so even if you don't know the names of these chords yet, if you start seeing patterns like this, go ahead and experiment with them because they'll help you out a lot. So that's our next chord, and what keeps that in that major scale is the fact that it incorporates all the notes from that major scale, because if you go, okay, that's the 6th note of your G major scale there, which is an E. So I also use the low E as an open, and then this note is the 8th note. It's your G. It's your conclusive note. Okay, and so then this note is the 10th, which is in our arpeggio. It's that. That's the 4th fret on the G string. So it's open E, then 7th fret on the A string, middle finger goes on the 5th fret of the D string, and then your index finger is on the 4th fret of the G string. So we go from here, and we're keeping in that arpeggio. So now the next chord is the exact same chord as its same fingering. All we have to do is move it up to, this is where the C comes into place. We move it up to the A string. See, just like that. So now you're on the 3rd fret of your A string. That's your C. That one right there. But it's the same fingering. Okay, so now we have, and then we can conclude it just by going back to that G, or if you like, the G major, the bar chord. It's very simple, and of course the arpeggio will work right over it. So anyways, this is just a small example. I'd like to get into more of this in the future, and there's plenty of ways I can explain this to you. But at least keep this in mind. If you don't fully comprehend it or grasp it right now, that's okay, because typically with music and guitar in general, these things reveal themselves over time. It's one thing. I hear a lot of guys who can sit there and rip off theory and stuff, but it's a whole nother matter to be able to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. So keep all these things in mind, and most important thing is to just experiment and see. This is an opinion of mine. It works, but this is a conclusion that I came to for myself. I'm sure there are other guitarists out there who have done the same with exactly what I'm talking about, but really what brings the best out of your music and your playing, even if you don't plan to write your own music, even if you plan to play other people's stuff, is just to be able to realize things by actually taking the time to experiment. So don't ever be afraid to do that. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I've got a lot more on the way, so stay tuned.